5 overrated albums from 2016. This is probably going to piss off some people. I thought it'd be fun and controversial to make this list. There were some albums from 2016 that I wasn't as into as everyone else seemed to be, so I thought I'd talk about them here and explain why I didn't like them that much.
Shortness of breath.
Chance the Rapper broke huge with his mixtape in 2013 with Acid Rap. Acid Rap was okay. I think I liked it a lot when I first heard it, but then over the years it's kind of not really stuck with me. I'm a bit meh on it now. There's a few songs on there that really weren't very good at all. But then his debut studio album came out, which was kind of still a mixtape technically, but it had, pretty much all the streaming services backing it, so it was pretty much a commercial release. And the hype for this was unreal. Like, there was never a way that this could have been as good as the hype suggested it was going to be. Like, there were so many people talking about this, and it just ended up being okay. Sure, Blessings, Angels were amazing songs. There were a few other great tracks on there too, but overall it was just okay. Like, it was a fine album. It wasn't anything all that special. I think there were some tracks that didn't work as well as others. I think he went in a gospel direction, which I liked, but then he didn't really stick out for the whole album, so it ended up sounding a little kind of like not very well put together, and it was a bit messy at points. It was inconsistent, it was overhyped, and it wasn't anywhere near as good as people made out it was. It was just a fine album. Bon Iver put out one of the best debut albums of the 2000s with Forever Ago. It was absolutely beautiful. I even did a review of that as well quite a while back. But 2016 saw them go in a completely different direction after their 2011 album, and I just didn't get it at all. For the most part, it felt like it was just doing what James Blake had already done like 5 years prior to 22 a Million. And 22 a Million to me was just completely like fractured. Like, there were so many fragments to it that just didn't quite add together into anything cohesive. I wasn't just, sonically I just wasn't following that album at all. I think people gave it so much credit for being experimental and being completely unique, which in a sense it kind of was, but it didn't really provide that much interesting music. And Justin Vernon's vocals on that album just really didn't resonate with me at all. This album was easily their worst album to date, and yet critics absolutely loved it. Now, I actually quite liked Solange's A Seat at the Table. A Seat at the Table was a pretty good album. It had Cranes in the Sky on there, which was near perfect. That song still is just absolutely unbelievable. I love that song so much. And there was the Sampha feature, which I liked as well. And overall, the album was good, but I just wasn't expecting all the critics to just jump on this album and give it like the highest ratings they possibly could and put it as like their album of the year. I mean, it was a good, decent album, but I just didn't see how it was that good. At points, I think the music on the album was actually really sleepy, and it didn't really have that much to grab you or really have much like texture to the instrumentation. Solange always sounded beautiful on the tracks, but that was pretty much the only redeeming quality across the album. If it wasn't for her vocals, that album probably would have just been a meh album, but her vocals were that good that I did think it was a good album. I just didn't see how so many people thought it was incredible. Out of all of the albums I've mentioned on this list, this is probably the best one, but still, I wasn't feeling it that much. Ugh, that album title is just horrific. I mean, Oh God. It was probably the worst album title of the year, but the 1975 didn't really provide that much, like anything on this album. It was just so boring. Not only were they dipping into elements of shoegaze, they weren't doing it all that well. Like so many bands have already done this, and 1975 shouldn't have been credited that much for doing what they were doing on this album. Their fans were acting like this was the best thing that they'd ever heard, and it was so unique and exciting, but it just was so sleepy. Their best songs were the ones where they sounded like they were doing really good impression of a 1980s band. Like I really like their tracks that did that, like The Sound and Love Me, but everything else on this album was absolutely like it was just it was all a throwaway. I think it is their fans that make their music even worse because they act like they make just the most groundbreaking stuff, but still, it was very overhyped and a lot of people loved it, and I just didn't get it. Pitchfork gave this a 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10. To put it into perspective of how high they've rated that, that would actually be his third highest rated album on their website. So The Life of Pablo to them is his third best album. Just, I don't know. But people loved The Life of Pablo. I don't get how. It was an absolute mess. He even had to re-release it because the recording quality on the initial release was that weak that he had to do it again. And his entire release schedule for that album was completely messed up anyway, but it still didn't provide that much excitement to the album. Sure, there's Ultralight Beam, Real Friends, No More Parties in LA, some of his best ever songs featured on that album, I think, but it was probably the messiest album of last year, and critics again seem to love it. Knowing the way Kanye West is, I feel like in 3 or 4 years' time he's not going to look back on this album and think positively on it because he's quite a perfectionist, and I feel like he's going to regret some of the decisions he made for the album. It was easily the most hyped up album of 2016, and it was nowhere near reaching its hype at all. It was a mess of an album. It's one of his worst albums. I don't like 808s and Heartbreaks that much, but even that is better than Life of Pablo. Life of Pablo, no, no, not a good album. And that is the list, the 5 overrated albums from 2016. Not the most overrated albums, there are probably more that I would put on a list if I were to make one, but these are just 5 that stand out in such an obvious way that I was just so confused as to how they had the hype that they had. But nevertheless, if you like these albums, then keep listening to them. I mean, I'm not telling you that you're wrong if you like them, that's totally fine. I did do an underrated list, which I will link in the description. You know, I am positive on music sometimes. I don't just rip it apart. But yeah, that list has some good albums on there too. So make sure you give that a watch. And if you like this video, make sure you subscribe for music reviews every day. And have a good day.